They didn't say it to my face, of course. That would have required a little courage. But I heard them, my own children, talking in the kitchen, assuming I'd gone to bed. "She really shouldn't be driving anymore," said Dean, my eldest. "It's not safe. She gets confused," his wife chimed in. "She nearly hit the mailbox last week," added my granddaughter, Emma, laughing like it was some cute little joke. "I didn't hit the damn mailbox. I swerved because a squirrel darted into the road. But no one asked me, and I didn't correct them. I just stood there in the hallway, unseen, listening to my own quiet erasure. I'm 78. I take my blood pressure pills with lemon water every morning. I balance my checkbook with a mechanical pencil. I drive a car I've kept in better shape than half the people I know. But somehow, my age has become a permission slip for people to speak over me, to decide for me. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed in the soft light of my bedside lamp, still in my house dress, slippers digging into the carpet. I looked at my hands, steady, thin-skinned, but still strong. I remembered those hands gripping the wheel when I drove my husband to the ER in the middle of the night. When I drove Emma to violin lessons twice a week for 6 years. When I drove to 3 different jobs after Harold died, just to keep the house. I've earned the right to drive. Not because I'm stubborn, because I still can. The next morning I made eggs with cheese and grits the way I like them, thick and salty. I opened the front curtains and watched the sun flood Maple Lane with its usual indifferent warmth. My neighbor's son waved as he walked his dog past my porch. The same boy who used to mow my lawn for $10 a pop. Now he's taller than the maple trees and calls me ma'am, like I'm a ghost of the past. My car, a well-kept '06 Buick, sat in the driveway like an old friend. I ran my hand over its hood as I passed by to get the mail. There were flyers, bills, and an invitation. Emma's daughter's 5th birthday party. Big number 5 in glitter, bouncing balloons drawn in crayon. The envelope wasn't addressed by hand. No note inside. Just a printed card. Transportation will be provided for Grandma Mildred. Please let us know if assistance is needed. Assistance. That word again. Not a question. A decision. At dinner that night, Dean mentioned it like it was nothing. "Mom, we'll send someone to pick you up for the party. No need for you to drive all that way." All that way was 13 minutes across town. "I'll be fine," I said. Calm, flat. Dean glanced at his wife. "It's just, Emma's rented a place near the lake, and it'll be busy. We figured it's easier this way." Easier for who? I wondered, but I only nodded. That's what I've done for years. Nod, smile, stay small enough to not get in the way. Later, while washing up, I dropped a dish. It shattered on the linoleum, sharp edges glinting in the light. I stood there a long time before picking it up. Maybe it wasn't just a dish. Maybe something else cracked in that moment. I went upstairs, opened my drawer, and pulled out the small envelope Harold left me in his will. "For something beautiful," it said. I never touched it. Never felt worthy of something just for me. I held it under the lamp. Still sealed. Still waiting. Maybe that something wasn't a painting or a vacation. Maybe it had wheels. Outside, the Buick sat in the dark, faithful but forgotten. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was scared, because I was planning. By morning, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I brewed my coffee strong, black as judgment, and drank it in my kitchen, the same kitchen where Harold once sat, reading the newspaper aloud to me, mispronouncing the fancy words on purpose just to make me laugh. Now the only sounds were the hum of the fridge and the small clink of my spoon against the mug. I dressed deliberately, not in my usual cotton pants and orthopedic shoes, but in a charcoal gray skirt suit I hadn't worn since the church deacon's funeral. My hands shook slightly as I fastened the brooch Harold gave me on our 40th anniversary, but the rest of me was steady. I even applied lipstick. I looked like a woman who had somewhere to be and something to say. The young man at the dealership didn't look up at first when I walked in. He was too busy showing something on his phone to a girl behind the front desk. When he did notice me, his expression shifted into something between politeness and amusement. "Can I help you, ma'am?" he asked, using that slow tone people reserve for the elderly or the unstable. "Yes," I replied. "I'm looking for something with power, something elegant, and something that doesn't apologize when it arrives." That got his attention. He glanced toward the entrance, as if expecting someone to walk in behind me. "Are you shopping for someone?" "I'm shopping for myself." A pause. He straightened a little. "Well, we have several great sedans, comfortable, reliable." "No." I pointed through the window to the lot. "I want to see that one." The Bentley, a deep navy blue beast with lines like silk and a grille that gleamed like a smirk. He blinked. "That's a flying spur. It's quite a lot of car." "So am I." He gave a tight little laugh, the kind young men give when they're not sure if they're being tested. But he led me outside. It was even more beautiful up close. Not flashy, not gaudy, just quiet confidence. I ran my fingers along the curve of the hood like I was meeting an old friend I didn't know I'd missed. "Would you like to sit inside?" he asked. "I'd like to drive it." He hesitated. "We usually, well, I'd have to ride along." I opened the driver's side door myself. "Then buckle in." It purred to life like something alive. Smooth, grounded. No awkward shuddering like my old Buick. No apologies. As I eased out onto the street, I saw the salesman sneaking glances at me, waiting, probably, for me to forget how to signal or mistake the gas for the brake. But I've been behind the wheel longer than he's been alive. I merged clean, turned steady. I even parallel parked, just for fun. When we got back to the lot, I turned off the engine and looked at him. "I'll take it." "Ma'am, this is a very high-end vehicle. Most of our customers—" "Do I look like most of your customers?" I handed him the envelope. "Bank draft, certified. My husband left it for me when he passed. I think this qualifies as something beautiful." He took the envelope, then looked at me properly for the first time. "I'll have the paperwork drawn up." That night, I parked the Bentley in my driveway. My neighbor across the street came out to water her petunias and stared like I'd rolled in on a spaceship. "New car?" she called out. "Old me," I answered. Inside, I sat down in Harold's armchair, kicked off my shoes, and closed my eyes. I didn't feel old. I didn't feel crazy. I didn't feel invisible. I felt ready. The next afternoon, Dean stopped by. He never came without a reason. He walked in with a grocery bag full of things I didn't ask for. Almond milk I don't drink, rice cakes I never eat, and dropped them on the kitchen counter like he was doing me a favor. "How are you, Mom?" he asked, already looking around, inspecting. That's what it felt like now. An inspection, not a visit. As if he were here to make sure I hadn't left the stove on or forgotten how to tie my shoes. "I'm well," I said. "I had a busy morning." "Oh?" His eyebrows lifted, curious but cautious. I didn't elaborate. He cleared his throat. "So, about Emma's party, just wanted to go over the plan. We figured it'd be best if Sam picked you up around 11:30. Sam? I asked. My assistant. Young guy, you met him once at the office Christmas party. I remember. I leaned back in my chair. And why would Sam be picking me up? Well, Dean said slowly, as if assembling the words carefully in case one of them might go off. It's a bit of a drive, and the parking near the lake is tight. We figured it might be less stressful for you. Stressful for me, I repeated. Yeah. And, just in case. He paused, smiled in that condescending way people do when they're about to say something awful. We don't want you to get turned around or anything. Turned around. That's what they say now. Not confused, not senile. Just gently turned around, like a sock inside out. I appreciate the concern, I said evenly, but I'll drive myself. Dean looked surprised, then amused. Mom, come on. There's no need to be stubborn. It's not stubborn. It's a decision. He sighed and sat across from me. Look, I get it. I do. But let's not pretend you're 25. I mean, the last time we went to that part of town, you nearly missed the exit. And the time before that, I said, you missed it entirely and blamed the GPS. He gave a tight smile. I'm just trying to make this easy. For who? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he opened one of my cupboards without asking and pulled out a glass. Poured himself some water. The way he moved through my kitchen, like it was his, like I was just a guest, made something cold settle in my chest. You don't have to prove anything, he said. You've done enough. That was the line. Right there. The invisible stamp they want to put on your forehead once you reach a certain age. You've done enough. Step aside now. Be quiet. Be grateful. He reached into his pocket and handed me a small envelope. Here's the address and the gate code, just in case. But Sam will still be there at 11:30. I took the envelope without a word. He kissed the top of my head like I was an old pet and left soon after, calling out, "Don't cook anything, they're catering." I stood by the window as he pulled away in his Lexus, sipping his self-satisfaction. I looked at the envelope. Printed directions. Gate code. And under that, a little sticky note, written in his wife's handwriting. Make sure she doesn't drive. Not this year. Last time was too close. Too close to what? Too close to reminding them I'm not gone yet? Too close to showing up under my own power, uninvited by anyone but the woman I still am? I placed the note back in the envelope and set it aside. Let them think what they want. I knew exactly where I was going and how I'd be arriving. I waited 3 days before taking her out. Not because I was nervous, but because I wanted the right day, the right light, the right kind of air to roll down the windows and let it wash through me like something sacred. Thursday morning gave me that. Sun like warm butter, just enough wind to carry the smell of blooming dogwood trees. I dressed in linen and leather loafers and set my purse on the passenger seat like it was a crown. The Bentley started with a whisper. No cough, no strain, just readiness. The driveway had never felt so short. I took the long way into town, not because I needed to, but because I could. Past the park where I used to take the kids when they still needed me to tie their shoes. Past the church where Harold and I once renewed our vows. Past the intersection where Dean crashed my old Ford into a fire hydrant and begged me not to tell his father. The world looked different through that windshield. Not because it was cleaner or wider, but because I felt like I'd rejoined it. For once, I wasn't being transported somewhere. I was moving through it, under my own power. When the fuel gauge hit halfway, I turned into a gas station near the freeway. It was one of those modern ones with coffee bars and aisles of chips pretending to be meals. As I stepped out, a young man, maybe 20, maybe 21, stood by his pickup a few feet away. He watched me approach the pump and immediately called out, "You need help, ma'am?" I looked at the nozzle in my hand, then back at him. "Do you?" He blinked. "I just thought, it's a fancy car, and, I can get that for you. I've been pumping gas longer than you've been alive, son." He laughed like I was joking, but I wasn't. Still, he wandered closer. "Cool car? Yours?" His tone had softened now, maybe realizing I wasn't in the mood for being managed. "Yes." "Your husband let you borrow it?" I turned, slowly. "He's been dead for 12 years. He flushed. "Oh, sorry. I just meant, I know what you meant." There was silence for a second. Then he nodded, awkward and red-faced, and wandered back to his truck. I slid the nozzle into the tank, pressed the button, and listened to the quiet hum of filling power. The sun caught the chrome just right. People stared as they walked by, and not with pity. Not with that careful smile people give older women, as if to say, "Still out and about? Good for you." No. This was curiosity. Maybe envy. Inside the store, a girl behind the counter rang up my coffee and said, "Is that your car out front?" "It is. My grandma doesn't drive anymore. She says it's too overwhelming now." "Maybe no one let her remember what it feels like," I said, stirring cream into my cup. The girl looked at me a moment longer, like I'd said something important, though I wasn't trying to. I was just telling the truth. Driving home, I stopped by the cleaners, the pharmacy, even the florist. Places I hadn't visited alone in months. Not because I couldn't, because someone was always telling me I shouldn't. When I pulled into my driveway, a familiar shape stood by my mailbox. Mrs. Alden, my neighbor, the one who always wore pastel cardigans like armor. She squinted at the car, then at me. "Well, Mildred," she said, one eyebrow lifted. "That's quite the vehicle." "It is," I answered, locking the door behind me. "Gets me where I need to go." She gave me a look, not rude, not exactly polite. The look people give when they realize the story they'd written about you might need rewriting. I went inside, took off my shoes, and set my purse down with care. Then I opened my notebook, the one where I wrote down what mattered now. On the first page, I wrote 4 words. I still choose how. I sat by the window with the notebook still open in my lap, the words staring back at me. I still choose how, not where, not when. How. That was what they'd tried to take from me, my right to choose how I move through this world. They dressed it up as concern, wrapped it in soft voices and careful suggestions, but it was still a theft. I thought of Harold, the way he used to tilt his head when I came down the stairs dressed for church. "You always know how to walk into a room," he'd say, like I was still 28 and full of thunder. Even near the end, when his body was giving out, he'd look at me like I was something unbreakable. He once told me, "You don't owe this world smallness, Mildred. It already tries to shrink you enough." But I'd been shrinking for years. Shrinking into quiet smiles at the dinner table. Shrinking into, "It's fine, don't worry," when plans changed or birthdays were forgotten. Shrinking into someone who asked for less and less, hoping maybe that would earn me a little room to just exist. And what did it get me? A gate code in an envelope. A stranger sent to pick me up, just in case. A family celebration planned around the hope that I'd quietly disappear. No. I stood, went upstairs, and opened the cedar wardrobe I hadn't touched in months. Everything inside still smelled faintly of lavender and old paper. I ran my hand along the dresses, blouses, cardigans, all so safe, so modest, so easy to overlook. At the back, wrapped in tissue, was the navy blue silk dress I'd worn to the retirement gala the year I left the bookkeeping firm. Harold had taken me dancing that night. I hadn't worn it since. I held it up. The fabric caught the light just enough to whisper confidence. Not loud, not attention-seeking, just sure of itself. It still fit. I laid it gently on the bed and walked over to my jewelry box. Not the day-to-day drawer with the clip-on earrings and elastic bracelets. The box. Carved wood, velvet-lined, heavy with time and memories. I chose the string of freshwater pearls Harold gave me for our 40th. They weren't grand, not expensive, but they had weight. History. I hadn't worn them since his funeral. In the mirror, I pinned my hair back, brushed on a little color to my cheeks, and added the softest rose lipstick I owned. The woman who looked back at me wasn't young, but she was unmistakably here. The Bentley keys lay on the entry table, waiting like a promise. I picked them up. Before I left, I wrote a small note and tucked it under the fruit bowl, where Dean always checked first when he dropped by unannounced. Don't worry about picking me up. I've already left. Mom. At the door, I paused. Not to hesitate, just to feel the stillness of my house one last time before I re-entered their world on my terms. Then I stepped out into the sun, silk dress brushing my calves, pearls warm against my skin, and slid into the driver's seat of my own damn life. I didn't just feel ready. I felt whole. The road into town shimmered in the late morning light, that golden hour when everything feels a little softer, a little more forgiving. I adjusted the mirrors, shifted my seat the way Harold used to do, 3 clicks forward, 2 back, and pulled gently out of the driveway. The Bentley moved like silk on polished wood, not a hum, not a rattle. The first stoplight turned green before I even had to brake. It felt like a blessing. As I merged onto the boulevard, people noticed. Not me, exactly, but the car, gleaming like a dropped sapphire in a sea of beige sedans and weary pickups. Men in baseball caps did double takes. A young woman walking her dog actually slowed down and raised her phone, probably to post a story. Some rich lady out flexing in a Bentley? Let them guess. Let them wonder who I was. At the second intersection, a boy in a red hoodie rode up beside me on a bicycle and pointed at the hood. "Hey, is that yours?" "It is," I said, rolling the window down just enough. He gave me a thumbs up. "That's sick." I smiled. That's what they say now. Sick. I remember when that meant the flu and chicken soup. "Be careful," I called as the light changed. He waved and shot ahead, light as a bird. The drive took 20 minutes, though I stretched it into 30. I turned up the classical station, something with strings and quiet thunder beneath, and let the world pass by like I'd never seen it before. Not as a woman someone else needed to protect. Not as someone being carted from one place to another, but as a presence. Solid. Moving. Seen. I passed the diner where Harold proposed, the library where I first took Dean to get his card, the empty lot that used to be a movie theater where we all lined up for matinees with buttered popcorn. None of it looked the same now. But then, neither did I. The navigation system guided me toward the lakefront. Paved roads gave way to cobblestone driveways and tall hedges. The houses here were glass-fronted and clean, every yard manicured into submission. Even the air smelled expensive, fresh-cut grass and chlorine. As I approached the gated entrance, I slowed. A young man in a security vest stepped out of the booth. "Name?" he asked, clipboard in hand. "Mildred Howard?" He flipped pages. I saw his brow furrow. "Hold on," he said. "You're not on the guest list." "No," I replied. "But I have the gate code." I typed it in myself, just as Dean had written. The gates opened. The young man watched me pass, his mouth still forming an objection. I drove in without flinching. The event hall stood at the edge of the lake, its glass walls reflecting the blue sky and the rows of parked cars in the lot, SUVs, sedans, a few hybrids. And now, one Bentley. I parked in the far corner, not because I was hiding, because I wanted the moment to stretch. For a second, I sat in the silence. My hands rested on the wheel. The pearls around my neck felt warm now, not cold, like they'd remembered the curve of my collarbone. Inside, I knew the party had already started. Balloons, cake, laughter, and probably relief, thinking I wasn't coming. Let them enjoy it. I stepped out, heels clicking against the pavement, and walked with steady steps toward the entrance. Not rushed, not dramatic, just present, like I'd always been. They just forgot. The double doors to the venue stood wide open, spilling music and laughter into the garden. Voices floated out, children squealing, someone shouting for more napkins, the high, trilling laugh of my daughter-in-law. I paused at the entrance, adjusted the clasp on my purse, smoothed the front of my dress. The silk felt cool under my palm, calm. No one noticed me at first. I stepped into the room, letting the air settle around me. White linen tables circled the hall, each one adorned with pastel balloons and name cards. A magician in suspenders juggled colored scarves near the cake table, while two women in identical floral dresses stood whispering by the mimosa bar. Then someone saw me. A young woman, Emma's college friend maybe, glanced my way and froze mid-sentence. Her eyes widened, her head tilted like she wasn't sure what she was seeing. Then came the hush. It wasn't a full stop, not the record scratch kind of silence. Just a ripple, a collective slowing down. Heads turned. Utensils paused midair, and in that soft, startled quiet, I kept walking. I wasn't there to make a scene. I was just there. Dean spotted me from across the room. His drink lowered an inch. His face rearranged itself quickly, surprise, confusion, something like guilt, though he tried to mask it. He broke from his group and crossed to me in a few long strides. "Mom," he said under his breath, "what are you doing here?" "I came to celebrate my great-granddaughter," I answered simply. "Isn't that what today's about?" He hesitated. Sam was going to pick you up. I left before he arrived. But we weren't sure you were still coming." I looked at him. Really looked. "You were sure I wouldn't," I said quietly. Before he could reply, Sandra appeared at his side. Lipstick perfect, earrings like tiny chandeliers. "Mildred," she said, voice light, brittle. "We didn't expect, we thought you were resting." "I've rested enough." Another pause. Her eyes drifted toward the entrance. She hadn't seen the car yet. That would come later. "We just wanted everything to be smooth today," she said, touching Dean's arm. "You know how much Emma planned." I'm sure she did a lovely job. I smiled at her. Not sweetly, just firmly. "And she'll be glad her great-grandmother came." A small child ran by, laughing with frosting on her cheeks. I looked past Dean and Sandra, toward the center of the room. Emma stood near the cake, distracted. talking to a caterer. I stepped around them. "Mama," I heard Dean say, quietly, helplessly. But I was already walking. Emma turned just as I approached. Her face lit up with surprise, and then with something else. Relief. Maybe even pride. "Grandma," she said, breaking into a smile. "You came." "Of course I did," I said, brushing a crumb from her sleeve. "You think I'd miss this?" She hugged me without hesitation. Not the polite kind, but tight. Real. "You look amazing," she whispered. "Thank you." Behind her, the guests slowly resumed their conversations. But every few moments, someone looked over. Eyes flicked from my dress to my face, trying to piece together the story. Maybe they were thinking, she walked in like a woman who knew she belonged here. Because I did. A few minutes later, I caught sight of Dean outside the window, finally seeing the Bentley parked along the hedge. His head tilted, his brows pulled tight. He turned back to the hall with a different look entirely. Let him wonder. Let them all. Emma took my arm like she used to when she was a child, without hesitation, without pretense. She led me toward the cake table where a small crowd had gathered, mostly friends and parents from her daughter's school. I could feel their eyes, their glances like warm pins pricking the back of my dress. They didn't say anything, but they noticed. Oh, they noticed. "This is my grandmother, Mildred," Emma said, beaming. "She raised 3 boys and ran her own business until retirement. Still drives herself everywhere." I raised an eyebrow at that last part, but didn't correct her. Let them hear it. One of the women, blonde, manicured, the type that doesn't sweat even in summer, smiled politely. "Nice to meet you, Mildred. That's a beautiful dress." "It's older than Emma," I replied, "but it still fits." A few chuckled lightly, not unkind, just uncertain how to place me. I wasn't the doddering matriarch they'd pictured. I wasn't quiet. I wasn't small. A man in a blazer tried to change the subject. "That Bentley outside," he said. "Someone's showing off today." I took a sip of punch. "It's mine." The pause was delicious. He blinked. "Oh, well, nice choice." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I let the silence do the work. Emma squeezed my hand, proud. She didn't need to say anything either. They moved on eventually, toward the magician and the photo booth, their curiosity satisfied but unsettled. I stood by the window, watching the lake shimmer. Somewhere near the dock, children were tossing pebbles into the water, shrieking with delight. It felt like I had returned to a place I never meant to leave. Not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually. For so long I'd been there, but not present. Smiling in photos, quiet in the back rows, letting myself become part of the scenery. But today I had entered the frame. A few minutes later, a familiar voice called out, hesitant. "Mom?" Dean had finally come back inside. He approached slowly, not the confident businessman now, but something younger, unsure. Sandra trailed a few steps behind, her eyes guarded. "I didn't know you'd be coming," he said. "Sam went by your place and, well, the car was gone." "I left early," I said, folding my hands calmly in front of me. "Didn't want to be late." He nodded, eyes flicking toward the window. "That's quite a vehicle." "It gets me where I need to go," I said. A pause. "I didn't mean to imply you couldn't drive, Mom. It was just, Emma planned everything so carefully, and we wanted it to go smoothly." I tilted my head. "And you thought my presence might ruin that?" "No, of course not." He ran a hand through his hair. "It's just, you know how it is." "I know exactly how it is." He looked at me then, Really looked. There was discomfort in his face, but something else, too. Recognition, maybe, of the woman he hadn't seen in a while. The one who used to run the entire PTA with one clipboard and no tolerance for nonsense. "I'm glad you came," he said finally. "I didn't come for your permission." He nodded slowly. "I know." Sandra shifted beside him. "Would you like to sit with us?" "No, thank you," I said, my voice still gentle. "I'm just fine where I am." That's the thing people forget. Refusing something doesn't mean you're angry. Sometimes it just means you know your worth, and you don't need a seat to prove it. The photographer passed by and asked if I wanted a picture with the family. I said yes. In the photo, I stood between Emma and her daughter. My son stood beside me, slightly behind, as if unsure where he belonged. The camera clicked. A moment captured. Later, they'd print it and maybe frame it. Maybe it would sit on a mantle somewhere, a silent reminder. But I already had the real thing. I was no longer watching from the edge. I was right there, center frame. And I wasn't going anywhere. I left the party without ceremony. No hugs, no long goodbyes. Just a gentle hand on Emma's shoulder and a whisper in her ear. "Thank you for seeing me." She nodded, eyes damp, but smiling. I walked out as the music swelled behind me, the sound of a family gathering that, for once, I wasn't watching from a distance. The sun was just beginning its slow descent, casting long gold shadows across the lot. The Bentley waited for me like a promise kept. I slid into the driver's seat, closed the door, and sat in silence for a moment, breathing in the scent of leather and the fading notes of children's laughter. Then I started the engine. The lake glimmered in the rearview mirror as I pulled away. For the first time in a long while, I didn't take the most efficient route. I took the road that wrapped along the edge of town, the one Harold and I used to drive just to see the hills roll by. No errands, no schedule. Just motion for the sake of motion. The town had changed. Chain stores replaced bakeries. Gas stations became glass towers with sushi bars. But the road was still mine. My hands on the wheel, the windows cracked just enough to let in the cool air and the faint hum of late summer insects. I remembered each stage of my life by the cars I drove. The old Ford station wagon, sticky with juice boxes and crayons, ferrying my boys to school. The Navy Civic that made it through Harold's chemo months. The beige sedan I drove to the courthouse when Dean's divorce finalized, and I picked up Emma myself. No questions asked. And now, this. Not a car for errands, not a car for making do. A car for showing up. A car that turned heads, not because it shouted, but because it didn't apologize. As I pulled into my neighborhood, a few people turned to look. Mrs. Alden again, this time standing on her porch watering her ferns, paused mid-spray. Her face twitched. Not quite a smile, not quite confusion. I nodded as I passed. She lowered the watering can. Further down, the Simmons boy, just out of high school, always polite, stood with a basketball under one arm. He watched me approach, and this time, he raised a hand in greeting. "Nice ride, Miss Howard," he called out. "Thank you," I answered, through the open window, not slowing. When I turned into my own driveway, I saw it. The small, quiet shift. The neighborhood had always seen me as the old woman with the white fence and a Buick that coughed. But now they looked again. Not with mockery. Not even with curiosity. With respect. I parked the Bentley, turned off the engine, and stepped out slowly. Not because I was tired, but because I wanted to feel the moment stretch. The car door closed with a satisfying hush. The wind picked up gently, moving the leaves on the maple tree by the porch. That tree had stood there through every season of my life. It had heard Harold's jokes, Dean's tantrums, Emma's first steps. And now it watched me too. Inside the house, the light was soft. I kicked off my shoes and walked barefoot through the quiet. The dress rustled with every step, like a memory refusing to fade. I poured a glass of water and sat in Harold's old chair by the window. The street outside was the same, but I was not. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't made a scene. I hadn't demanded anything. And yet, I had reclaimed everything. The right to show up. The right to be seen. The right to choose how. Outside, the Bentley gleamed in the twilight, and I let myself smile. The house was quiet. The kind of quiet I used to dread. When the boys had moved out, when Harold passed, when holidays came and went with no knock at the door. But tonight, the silence felt earned, like peace. I carried my water into the living room and settled into the wide armchair, facing the mantel. The family photos were all still there, though I hadn't dusted them in a while. Not out of neglect, just habit. When people stop looking at you, you stop polishing the frame. But tonight, I looked. Dean in his graduation cap, grinning too wide, cheeks flushed. Emma at 5, sticky-fingered and gap-toothed, wrapped in my arms. Harold and I on the beach, the wind trying to tear off his hat, both of us laughing like fools. They hadn't changed, but I had. I reached for the envelope I'd tucked into my purse before leaving the party, the one with the photo from the event, already printed by the on-site photographer. I slipped it out and studied the image. Emma, beaming. Her daughter, arms around my waist. Me, standing tall, pearls shining. Dean, slightly behind, shoulders tense, eyes unsure. I placed the photo on the mantel, beside the others. It didn't replace them, it completed them. Then the phone rang. I didn't answer. It rang again, Sandra this time. Then a message. Then another. I let them come. One by one. Like rain tapping the windows. I walked to the kitchen, pulled open the drawer where I kept the old recipe cards, and found the one Harold had written in his blocky, neat script. Mildred's peach cobbler. Do not change a damn thing. I smiled and ran my fingers over the ink. I hadn't made it in years. Too sweet, too messy, too much for one person. But maybe I'd make it tomorrow. For myself. The phone buzzed again. This time a message lit up from Dean. Mom, can we talk? I feel like I messed up. Please call me when you can. I stared at the screen. The weight of all the years settled in my chest. Not anger, not resentment. Just the exhaustion of always making space for other people's guilt, while mine had to stay silent. I didn't feel like punishing him. I didn't feel like forgiving him either. I just didn't feel like replying. For once, silence would speak for me. I turned the phone over and placed its screen down on the table. People think silence means surrender, but sometimes it's resistance. Sometimes it's a wall you build to stop others from coming in unless they're willing to knock like they mean it. I lit a small lamp near the window. The Bentley sat under the porch light like a secret I no longer had to keep. I thought about all the things I used to do automatically, waiting for the phone to ring, jumping up to fix a plate, answering every request with, "Of course, dear." Tonight, I didn't owe anyone anything. Not an explanation, not a return call, not even a second chance. I simply existed. Stillness wrapped itself around the house like a shawl. I made tea, strong and plain, and brought it back to the armchair. No distractions, no noise. just the sound of my own breath, and the certainty that I had finally stepped into my own life, not as someone's mother, someone's wife, someone's responsibility, just as Mildred, and she was enough. The next morning, the light came in soft and honest. No pressure, no plans. Just the sun doing what it always did, rising, whether anyone noticed or not. I made my tea and drank it slowly by the window, barefoot, wrapped in my old robe. The Bentley sat outside like it belonged there now, like it always had. After breakfast, I dressed simply, cream slacks, a navy blouse, leather flats, no pearls, no silk, just clean lines and intention. I needed eggs and sugar, two things I normally would have written off until someone else went shopping. But not today. Today, I felt like walking down the baking aisle for myself. The grocery store was busy for a weekday. Retirees comparing cereal prices, young mothers juggling toddlers and shopping lists, a high schooler half asleep at the register. I moved through the aisles with steady steps. Not fast, not slow, but with that same sense I'd felt yesterday, of taking up space without apology. Near the dairy case, I heard someone call my name. Mildred? I turned. It was Denise Carver. We used to work together at the accounting office. She'd retired years before I did, moved out of town for a bit, and I hadn't seen her since Harold's funeral. Her eyes widened. Well, I'll be. You look different. I smiled. So do you. Still walking like you've got somewhere better to be. She laughed. And you, well, you're taller than I remember. I think I just started standing straighter. Denise wheeled her cart closer. I saw that car out front. That yours? It is. I nearly dropped my coupons, she said, eyes twinkling. It's about time you did something outrageous. We chatted by the eggs, blocking traffic. She didn't rush. Neither did I. And when she hugged me goodbye, she said, "You've got a glow, Mildred. Like you remembered something the rest of us forgot." I carried that with me all the way home. As I stepped into the driveway, a voice called from across the street. "Miss Howard?" It was Marcus Simmons, the teenager with the basketball. He jogged over, sheepish. I didn't mean to stare yesterday. I just never seen a Bentley in real life before." "No offense taken," I said. He scratched his neck. "Some people said you must have won the lottery or something." I smiled. "Something like that." He grinned. "Well, it suits you. The car, I mean." I nodded. "Thank you, Marcus." "That's kind of you to say." He lingered a moment longer, then jogged back toward his house. I watched him go. The boy who used to shovel my walk for $5 and a cookie. I unlocked the door and walked into the quiet, arms full of small things that felt big. Eggs, sugar, approval, memory. I'd spent so many years trying not to be a burden. And here I was, becoming a presence. It was like waking up inside your own life and realizing it still fit. Only now, I chose how to wear it. It was late afternoon when I heard the knock at the door. Not a delivery knock. Not the impatient rattle of the UPS man or the shy tap of a neighborhood kid selling candy bars. No, it was slow, measured. The kind of knock a man gives when he's not sure what kind of welcome he's going to get. I didn't rush to answer. I finished my tea, folded the dish towel on the counter, and wiped my hands on my slacks. The knock came again, this time softer, like whoever was out there had already started regretting it. I opened the door. Dean stood on the porch, dressed too casually for a workday, like he hadn't known what to wear for this. He held a takeout bag in one hand, as if it might earn him some credit. "Hi, Mom." Dean, I brought dinner, thought maybe you hadn't eaten yet. I stepped aside, letting the silence answer for me. He entered slowly, looking around like he was seeing the house for the first time. He placed the bag on the kitchen table, not sure whether to sit or wait for permission. "You can sit," I said. "I'm not going to bite." He gave a dry chuckle. "Didn't think you would, but I wasn't sure if I'd be welcome." I didn't say that either. He sat. I poured him a glass of water. No small talk. No fuss. For a minute, we just listened to the ticking of the kitchen clock. "I guess I messed up," he said finally. I didn't respond. He glanced up. "At the party, I should have made sure you felt included. I should have been more direct with Sandra when she started making comments about how it might be better if Mom didn't drive alone. I should have." "It wasn't just the party," I said, my voice quiet but flat. "Don't make this about one mistake." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. That, at least, was progress. "I've made a habit," I continued, "of giving you space, of not interfering, of letting you grow into your life however you saw fit. But somewhere along the way, you mistook my silence for disappearance. That's not fair, Mom. Isn't it?" I looked at him. Really looked. "You speak to me like I'm fragile. You plan things around me like I'm an obstacle. And worst of all, you believe you're doing me a kindness." He winced. I know you didn't mean it, but it still hurt." He was quiet. The only sound was the ice melting in his untouched glass. "I don't want to fight with you," he said finally. "I just want us to move on." "I've already moved on, Dean. That's what you're struggling with." He looked at me, surprised. "I don't need an apology. I don't need a seat at your table. What I need is what I gave myself this week. Permission to live without waiting for someone else to allow it." His face softened. Maybe for the first time, he saw me not as a role, not as Mom, but as a woman. "I was scared," he admitted quietly. "Not that you'd hurt yourself, but that I wouldn't know how to help if you did. And maybe it was easier to just keep you still. Predictable." I nodded slowly. "I understand fear. I've lived with plenty of it. But you don't protect someone by shrinking them." We sat there in silence again. This time it wasn't tense, just full. "I don't want to lose you," he said. "You already did," I replied gently. "But not forever. Just long enough for me to find myself again." He nodded, swallowing hard. "You want to stay for dinner?" I asked, standing. He looked at the takeout bag and smiled sheepishly. "It's probably cold. I've eaten worse." He followed me into the kitchen, quieter now, more careful. Not with my plates or my feelings, but with his presence, with the space he took up in my life. We didn't talk much while we ate, but for the first time in a long while, the silence between us wasn't heavy. It was healing, and I didn't feel small anymore. She came the next evening, just as the light was thinning and the breeze was turning cool. I was out back, pruning the hydrangeas, half because they needed it, half because I wanted an excuse to keep my hands busy. "Mama?" I turned. Emma stood at the gate, no makeup, hair in a bun, wearing a sweatshirt too big for her and holding something wrapped in foil. "I brought banana bread," she said. "Still warm." I opened the gate. "I'm not supposed to take gifts from people who ignore gate codes." She laughed softly. "Guilty." We sat on the porch, the bread between us, sliced and steaming. She didn't look like the girl I used to pick up from violin lessons. She looked tired in the way young mothers get tired, deep in the bones, but still lit from somewhere inside. "I wanted to see you," she said. "Alone." I nodded, not pushing. She picked at the crust of her slice. "I know I haven't always been proud." I waited. She swallowed hard. "When I was younger, I didn't want my friends to know we picked you up in that old Buick. I used to slouch in the seat so they wouldn't see. I told people you were my babysitter." That stung, but not like a wound. More like an old bruise you forgot was there. "I was ashamed," she said. "Not of you, just of how people might see you. Isn't that worse?" "Children are built to want to blend in," I said. "It's not personal, it's survival." She shook her head. "No, it was personal. I didn't see what was in front of me. I saw wrinkles, old shoes, slow hands. I didn't see the woman who raised 3 boys and buried a husband without asking anyone for anything. I didn't see the woman who showed up to every concert, who brought soup when I was sick, who never missed a single birthday." I let her speak. She needed to. "I saw you walk into that party, Mama," she said, her voice trembling now. "And it hit me. I've been trying to be seen my whole life, through grades, jobs, Instagram likes. But you just walked in, and the whole room stopped. And not because you shouted, because you didn't." I sipped my tea, letting the weight of her words settle. "I'm proud of you," she said, looking me in the eye. "Not just for the car, for the walk, for the choice, for not asking permission." I smiled gently. "Took me long enough?" She laughed, wiping her eyes. "I want to be like you." "You don't," I said. "You want to be like you, but less apologetic." She leaned into my shoulder, her head light against me, like it used to be when she was small and sticky with popsicle juice. "I don't know why it's so hard to be a woman sometimes," she whispered. "Because they don't teach us how to stay whole," I said. "Only how to give away the pieces." We sat that way a while. No mending, no rewriting. Just 2 women, finally speaking in the same language. Before she left, she hugged me tight. Not careful, not soft. Real. And when she stepped off the porch and turned to wave, I saw something in her face I hadn't seen before. Not admiration, not apology. Recognition. On Thursday morning, I woke with no plans and no voice in my head reminding me who I was supposed to be for someone else. No errands, no appointments, no one expecting me. The kind of morning that used to ache with emptiness now felt like a page left blank on purpose. I dressed simply: gray slacks, pale blouse, a light scarf Harold once brought me from Savannah, back when he still traveled for work and always came home with something soft in a paper bag. The Bentley purred as I backed out of the driveway. The day was crisp, the kind of autumn that smells like wood and distance. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't check my phone. I just drove. After 20 minutes, I found myself turning into a gravel lot off Route 17, a place I hadn't visited in more than a decade, Lakeview Diner. They'd remodeled it, painted the outside white and gray, replaced the sign, made it look like it belonged in a lifestyle magazine instead of a small town. But I knew it right away. This was where Harold and I used to come on Sundays after church, when the boys were small and fidgety, and nothing on the menu cost more than $5. We always sat in the same booth, third from the window, left side. He liked the view. I liked the hush. I stepped inside. The hostess was young, maybe 17, face still full of angles and questions. She offered a polite smile, her eyes glancing, briefly, toward my keys. "Just you today?" "Yes." "Booth or table?" "Booth," I said. "Third from the window, if it's open." She nodded, led me over without question. I slid into the seat and exhaled slowly. The cushion was firmer than I remembered, but the air was the same: coffee and maple syrup, vinyl and old conversations. The waitress came, smiled, poured water. No fuss. I ordered a single pancake, black coffee, and 2 slices of bacon. Harold's order, not mine. I don't even eat bacon anymore. But something in me wanted to taste the past, not out of grief, but as a reminder. I was still here. I'd lived all of it. I hadn't disappeared. While I waited, I watched the diner fill slowly. A man in a delivery uniform unwrapped his sandwich like it was a gift. A woman in scrubs scrolled her phone with one hand, rubbing her temple with the other. A boy in a varsity jacket tried to impress a girl who wasn't looking up from her menu. No one noticed me. And for once, I didn't feel invisible. I felt free. Not being seen is different from not needing to be. My food arrived. I took my time. I didn't check the clock. I didn't read the news. I didn't scroll through other people's lives pretending it was connection. I just ate. Afterward, I left a tip bigger than the bill and walked out without ceremony. The sun had shifted slightly, making long lines across the hood of the car. I stood there a moment, hand on the door, letting the warmth settle into my shoulders. I remembered something Harold once said, half joking, half tender. One day, when we're old and everyone's forgotten us, we'll go out to breakfast and pretend we're strangers having a first date. And in a way, that's what this felt like. Not the end of something, the beginning of knowing myself again. The Bentley started without hesitation. I pulled onto the road and let the wind crack the silence. No music. No narration. Just the hum of an engine built to move forward. Some things come softly, like sleep. Not all triumphs shout. Not all homecomings come with banners and open arms. Sometimes they arrive like a woman walking into her own kitchen, setting down her keys and knowing, without anyone saying so, that she is finally allowed to take up space again. I've been thinking lately about the word arrival. It's not always where you land. Sometimes it's when you stop waiting to be invited. Yesterday, I sat down and wrote myself a letter. Not because I needed to remember anything specific, but because I wanted the truth written in my own hand. I'll leave it here. You were never too much. You were never too loud, too proud, too stubborn. You were simply unpracticed in shrinking. You thought love meant softness, and it did for a while, until they used it against you. You thought silence was kindness until you realized it was just room they used to build cages. But now you've remembered. You do not need permission. Not from your son. Not from your neighbors. Not even from the version of yourself you once promised to stay small for. You've remembered the sound of your own voice when it isn't asking. You've remembered how it feels to move forward without explaining. You've remembered the cost of erasure and chosen, finally, to stay visible. You don't owe anyone an apology for coming back to life. I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer where I keep my passport, just behind the photograph of Harold and me in the garden. That year, the roses refused to die. Dean calls more often now. Not out of guilt, but out of something quieter. Curiosity, maybe. Emma drops by with muffins, sometimes without a word. Sometimes just to sit. We don't talk about the party anymore. We don't need to. The car is still in the driveway. I drive it less now, not because I'm afraid, but because I no longer need it to prove anything. It served its purpose. And so did I. Not as a warning, as a reminder. We are never too old to return to ourselves. If you're still reading, maybe that's what you needed to hear. Don't wait for permission. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't wait until they ask what happened to you. Just go. They said I was too old to drive. So I drove, and I arrived. If this story found you, maybe it was meant to. If you saw yourself between the lines, leave a comment. If you felt it in your chest, don't keep it to yourself. I told mine. Now tell yours.